If you've ever felt like you've needed a little help with figuring out the mom-life balance, well, my guest today is for you. It is Whitney Casares, MD, MPH, FAAP, a board-certified pediatrician, author, speaker, and full-time working mom. She just wrote and released the Working Mom Blueprint. And today we really dive in deep to what does it look like to create that balance that you feel not only satisfied in chasing after those dreams and ambitions that you have, but also connected to your kids without feeling the weight and burnout that comes so often from trying to do it all at one time. Today, we are also going to dig deeper into what practical, expert-rooted advice you can have as a mom to feel supported, not only in your community, but within yourself and with your partner. So dive in deep with me because this is a good one you do not want to miss, and grab a paper and pen. I promise you're going to want it. So you want to make an impact. You're thinking about starting a business, sharing your voice. How do women do it that handle motherhood, family, and still chase after those dreams? Well, listen each week as we dive into the stories of women who know. This is Call Me CEO. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Call Me CEO. I am your host, Camille Walker, and today we are talking with Whitney Casares, who is an MD, a graduate of Stanford University and Berkeley, and I know I'm forgetting another university. She lives in Portland, Oregon, super smart, and is going to dish with us how to find balance of how to be a working mom and not lose our minds. Her most recent book that she has written is The Working Mom Blueprint. And I cannot wait to dig into your story, Whitney, today. Thank you so much for being here.
For sure. Thank you for having me.
So I want to hear more about your background because we were having a conversation briefly before this, and you had mentioned that you were doing all the right things and you still were feeling some loss and confusion and not knowing how to find balance within your own life. Tell us a little bit about your history with, my goodness, all these accolades. First, to start with, I'm like, this woman is incredible. Tell us a little bit about that. And then let's dive in deep into how this book was created.
Yeah. Well, it's funny that you mentioned actually the institutions that I've been at, because I got to those places not because I am the smartest person in the room, but because I've always been the hardest working person in the room. And of course, I was afforded some privileges just from, I grew up in like the suburbs of the US and, my parents were supportive and all of those good things, right? So I want to remember that. But I was always the person who was the hardest working person in the room, but sometimes lost focus on effectiveness. On actually creating something that I was really happy with inside myself. And that commitment to kind of being driven or just being ambitious or being able to just work really, really hard, be committed, it worked really well for me before I had kids because I didn't have anything else that I needed to account for. I could be in my pediatrics office. I work in private practice pediatrics. I've done it for about 12 years. I could be the person that my partners could count on if there was a sick kid at the end of the day, or they needed an extra committee member, or someone needed to run the, company picnic in the summer. Like, sure, count on me. I'll do it. Right.
I'll do it.
And and in part because I really absolutely bought into this lean in mentality of if I want to be part of it, I need to 100% go for it and kind of almost put on like this mask of I'm fine no matter what. Also because the culture of medicine is very much that way of just like, get it done, do it, don't complain. But then also because I love work. I love taking care of patients. I love making a difference in people's lives. I love connecting with people. I always wanted to be in a career. And so that worked for me. I could kind of lean into my job. And then I had a kid, and my first baby threw me for a loop. Motherhood hit me so hard. She was a hot mess. honestly. And I love her. So later on, when she listens to this in 20 years, she'll forgive me, but she was such a hot mess. She never slept. She had horrible colic.
Mm.
We would drive around Portland for 3 hours at night to try to get her to sleep. I mean, I I had to do work to get her to sleep for more than 45 minutes at a time when
Wow.
she was 13 weeks old in order for me to go back to work at all. And even then, I remember writing a prescription for someone for eye drops. I mean, something that didn't matter at all, like something that was, don't worry, I didn't endanger anyone. But where the pharmacist called me back and said, "What? You didn't even make sense in your phone message," because I was so delirious. So that happened. And then I kind of thought, well, I'll get over that newborn period. That should be fine. But then she continued really having a lot of needs. And in fact, as she got older, those needs became bigger. I know now that she has a severe anxiety disorder
Mm.
that caused her to have these dysregulated moments that were way outside the realm of typical. We were concerned she had autism for the first 3 years of her life. She had trouble potty training. She had trouble when her little sister came along with dealing with that. She had separation anxiety, all the different things. And I had to just really dive into her needs as well. And so I was seeing psychologists and psychiatrists and parent coaches and all the people doing labs, doing all the things. And so I had to like lean into her. But then also at work, as I became more senior, they wanted me to lean in even further there. And so I became like this yo yo kind of on a
Mm.
string where I would just be like back and forth, back and forth. And I would overcompensate in each area in order to make it so that I felt like I was kind of doing a good job in each part, but I never felt like I was doing a good job in either realm. And then maybe the worst part of it is that as an individual human being, I kept feeling like my needs, my mental health, my physical health, like it just got lost in the middle. And that I would do things to try to soothe myself that really weren't that healthy, right? Little things like watching Netflix all night long, like 10 episodes of Big Little Lies
Oh
or
yeah.
whatever,
Uh-huh. Yeah. I know what you're talking
Yeah.
about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or bigger things like eating because I was like really conflicted inside, not because I was actually hungry, drinking maybe a little too much. At the age of 12 months with my daughter, I marched into the living room after being up with her for 36 hours. I told my husband, like, we're leaving. We're going on a trip. The two of us are going. I got to get out of here. you know,
Yeah.
Things that as I look back on were just this like cry of this inner conflict that I had that was going on. And so I started this journey to try to be more centered for myself. And then I also heard this cry from other moms too. There was this article this last summer in the New York Times that was called The Primal Scream.
Mm.
That was about moms and what they're facing with the pandemic. But I think it actually speaks to this bigger internal scream that moms are having, working moms specifically, but all moms really, and especially higher level, executive level, career driven women, of feeling like, oh my gosh, I just feel this like tightness in my chest as I think about all the things I'm trying to juggle, but that I'm not being really effective in any one area of my life.
Oh, like everything that you're saying right now. I know that people are listening to this right now, nodding their heads. And something
Mhm.
that I read in your book specifically, you say, no previous generation has applied more effort in creating a harmonious coexistence between work and life. For baby boomers and Gen X, it was normal to draw a line in the sand and expect family life and work to be separate. But with technology significantly changing the way we work today and into the future, it is increasingly difficult to separate the two. And I think that that is so true. It's a blessing and a curse because we are afforded more opportunities to work from home and to always be available and to always have our phone with us and always get that text message. And I think you're right. It's that confusion, that primal, like, I can't be everything to everyone all the time.
Mhm. Exactly.
Yeah.
You cannot. And I think it's interesting because as working women, we really have dug into this idea of we just need to build efficiency or build productivity for ourselves or work in exercise at 5:30 in the morning before everybody else wakes up or stay up a little later to get it all done. And really that just burns us out. Like adding more is not the answer. And also efficiency and productivity are part of the puzzle. They're an important part, but they're not the whole puzzle. I mean, if you're just quicker to do things, more efficient at doing things, it just leaves more room if you don't have a sense of yourself, a centered sense of yourself, to just add on more.
Right.
Then, because you finish that task, move on to the next one.
I can relate to this. I don't know if you have done the Enneagram test before.
Mm-hmm.
What are you?
I'm the one that's control. I don't know what number that is.
Maybe number 1. I don't know.
So. I think so. I have memorized. I've only done it like once or twice.
Yeah, same. But what I'm relating to with that is that, okay, I did that task. Now let's move on to the next. And I think that that's so easy for us as women and mothers, especially working moms, to be like, okay, well, that list is done. Give me another one. Like it's very much like this do mentality, which at times can be really fulfilling, but very often can cause burnout. So how were you able to transition from that sense of overwhelm and burnout and create more of a healthy boundary for yourself?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think about this framework that actually in on my platform, Modern Mommy Doc, that we talk about, that's called the Centered Life. That kind of talks about if you yourself are a center, all the things you care about the most, the things, and everybody kind of has their own centered vision. So like mine, the things that matter the most to me, 5 most important things would be that I am connected to my family, have good relationships, that I'm contributing specifically to other women, that I'm exploring and traveling, hard to do with COVID this past year, but exploring and traveling, that I have financial freedom, right? And that I have like health and wellness. And I don't just mean I'm a size 0, but I mean like I mentally am at peace.
Yeah.
And then there's all these other things though that are outside of that circle that have to get done, but that don't have to necessarily define you. So they're the things like all the laundry and the camp signups and your work emails that aren't actually about your mission of work. They're just things you have to do, appointments that you have to make, your pap smear, right? Like all of those things that are kind of outside the circle. But for most of us, family obligations, all these things that for most of us push in on the circle and make it so that we have absolutely no room for the things that we actually want to spend our time and energy on. And then in the very center of the circle, I think about ourselves, like taking care of ourselves, knowing ourselves, trusting ourselves, learning to know our own worth so that we can be compassionately assertive with other people. You know, that like, I get it. This is your deal. And also here's my boundary, right?
Yeah.
So the book, the Working Mom Blueprint that's here talks about different tools and applications kind of that blueprint, but really having this understanding of every single thing in your life deserves a place. And it kind of has to stay in place in order for you to have perspective and to not get pulled like outside of your centered circle into all these other things that don't matter at all. I could spend hours on Amazon ordering toilet paper, right? and I would have checked a lot of things off my list, but nothing would have felt very fulfilling at the end of the day.
Building a successful business takes a clear understanding of your goals and where you want to go. That is why I love Cube Money. It is an app card combo that allows me to assign a purpose to each dollar in my checking account. No more wondering where you stand in regards to your bills, because with each transaction, you make a mental check-in with your balance. Create goals and stick with them in your lifestyle and business so you can live more and stress less. Go to cubemoney.com/Camille to get started today. That's Cube spelled Qube money.com today, and make those dreams a reality. What would you say in your transition from going from that overwhelm to that peaceful place? What was the biggest change that you made within you?
I think the biggest change was developing a practice of mindful self-compassion. I don't know if you're familiar with mindful self-compassion, but it's this idea of basically talking to yourself in a way that your best friend would,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
instead of being kind of like the mean critical coach, that instead you're kind of able to self reflect on, huh, I feel guilty right now. My kids want to come at me in this Zoom meeting. I'm in a Zoom meeting. My kids are knocking on the door. My boss is looking at me weird on the Zoom meeting. Wow. Okay. How do I feel? I feel guilty. I feel frustrated. Right. And then validating that feeling, that makes so much sense that I would feel guilty and frustrated because I have
Hmm.
two competing interests coming at me at exactly the same time. And then that common humanity piece of, I bet I could fill a coliseum full of working moms that would feel exactly the same way that I do. I'm so not alone.
Mm.
And then that ability, when you come from that pause, to be able to make decisions for either that moment, like, okay, I got to turn off the Zoom meeting because these kids, they need me, or I got to like tell my kids, go watch a movie for 15 minutes. So in the moment, being able to make responsive decisions, or the ability to say, probably even better, like reflect back, be curious about maybe tomorrow I have 5 meetings that are scheduled and my kids are also supposed to be here in the living room, bored out of their minds while I have this meeting. What can I do to make it so that maybe they're better entertained? Or do I need to cancel a meeting? Or what are the shifts I need to make so that that way I can feel like I'm not feeling this way tomorrow, and my kids won't feel this way, and that my priorities are in line. In the book, I talk a lot about priorities. Like, if my priorities are both work and my kids, my mission of work and my kids, that's totally fine. It doesn't have to mean that I spend all day, every day with my kids, but my kids do deserve a piece of that puzzle. So how am I going to balance those things? And I think that mindful self-compassion is the way that you balance them without just being reactive and going back and forth on that yo-yo. It allows you to kind of like think thoughtfully through what's a decision that I need to make, either for right now or for the future.
Hmm. I love that. Is that a practice that you were able to figure out on your own, or did you do therapy that helped you to become more reflective and compassionate with yourself?
Yeah. So mindful self-compassion is Kristen Neff, um, who has a whole book called Mindful Self-Compassion. Self-Compassion. And I found it actually through a therapist. So absolutely, I'm such a huge fan of therapy. I think that therapy is like the best way to have someone else reflect back on you, the things that you're saying that would be obvious to everyone else in the room, but that sometimes you can't see for yourself. So I definitely did therapy, but my therapist specifically uses mindful self-compassion. And then the more that I became connected with other mommy bloggers, with other therapists within the motherhood health space, I started to see this was this common theme
Hmm.
that every single person who seemed to feel a bit more grounded was using this technique of mindful self compassion. And now I see it everywhere. So, mindful self compassion was for sure not developed for working moms or for being able to deal with this inner conflict. I mean, in the very beginning, honestly, it was about me dealing with my super anxious kid having horrible tantrums and spitting in my face when she was in a place where she was really out of control. And me having to deal with the fact that I felt so angry and disappointed and
Mhm.
embarrassed when I was in the grocery store with her doing these things with her almost 8-year-old body. Right.
Yeah.
Um, but then I realized, oh, wait, this is like one of the huge keys to the rest of this stuff that I'm dealing with too, which you know how it is in life. It's usually the simplest answers that go across all facets of your life that make the biggest difference.
Yeah. I love that you talked about filling a coliseum with other mothers who would be feeling the same way, because I think for any of us who had seen a situation like that about a child losing their minds at a grocery store, or a mother carrying a child away under one arm and seeing that parent and being like, whoa, what's the problem? The reason why we didn't understand that, or the reason why we may have judged that mother or that moment, is because we weren't. a mother that had experienced that yet. And it's so
Right.
funny, like after you've gone through so many different motherhood experiences, you just are in my mind. Now, when I see those things, I'm like, solidarity. Like,
Yeah.
I send my love to you, my good vibes to you. You are trying your hardest, and I see you. And it's almost like sending that hug, and and I think that that's so easy to forget when we're the one in that spotlight of really struggling, but to know that those struggles are universal. It doesn't matter, what, where you are. Like, we all go through those things, and it's really perspective and time that I think that we can wrap our heads around that and really have more compassion. And I love that you took that proactive step of really talking to yourself in that way of, I'm feeling this way, and I am feeling this way about myself as a mom or as a person, but what else is true about me, and what else can I explore, and what, about the good things that I'm doing as a mom, right? Is that a
Yeah.
practice that you look at as well?
Yes, absolutely. And I think I even see that in my leadership role in my business. I
Mhm.
see that with my team members that if something rubs me the wrong way, or if someone doesn't do something in a way that I hoped they would, or a project falls flat that we try, because of course we're always trying new things and trying to push ourselves a little bit to say, well, maybe our audience would love this. We ask them, but even if we ask them and they say yes, we love it, sometimes it still falls flat. A blog article nobody reads. And so instead of getting down on ourselves as like, this is a failure moment, to really think about like, gosh, how could I get curious about what we could change? I wonder, like all these I wonder statements that now I've
Mm.
had to learn over and over and over again. And I wanted to come back to your other question because you asked about, what are the things that really changed my perspective. The other thing that changed for me, which is so practical, it's less woo woo, is just this idea of I deserve, as a person who's doing all of these things. And in fact, I will be better at doing all these things if I actually give myself time to reconnect with myself, to re energize, to to remember what it was like before I was a mom, the things that I loved, right? To
Yeah.
listen to my Justin Bieber music in my AirPods really loud, to dance around the house to Dua Lipa, like all those things. Like I got to have time to do those things. And if I only give myself 5 minutes in between appointments, or if at the end of the day, if I run myself ragged and I don't have any space at the end of the day, then I won't have time to kind of do that. Like, oh, yeah, this is the thing that makes me feel good. Oh, this is the time when I do feel centered. So then I can kind of call on, I'm out of alignment when I'm not in that good space. Um, and so I'm always encouraging people. I say, at least an hour 3 days a week. You deserve that. I know for some moms that sounds like so much time. I had a mom the other day that I was working with who I said, what's your goal for the next quarter in terms of kind of this effectiveness balance stuff between work and life? And she goes, it's 10 more minutes to myself a week. Like,
Oh.
that is an amazing starting place if you had a newborn. Like
Yeah.
I'll give you that if you have a newborn, but if you are a mother of three, your youngest child is 4 years old. Like, no, let me challenge you a tiny bit.
Mm.
You don't have to spend money during the time that you're by yourself. You don't have to do something fancy. You don't have to travel, none of that. I'm just talking about simply like you're reading a book that you want to read. You are exercising, you're meeting up with a friend, maybe distanced right now, for a glass of wine, you are watching a show that you really want to watch, like anything that's not about you being productive, and
Mhm.
anything that's not about you performing, just you being, that you deserve that.
I love that. I think that that's so easy. I went to a conference this last weekend with my daughter. It was called Dear Daughter, and Allison Faulkner was one of the speakers. She does Allison Faulkner, the Allison Show. And one of the things that she had us repeat to our daughter, and our daughter say to us, was, "You're here to be you, not do, do, do." And we would chant that back and forth to each other. You're here to be you, not do, do, do. And then she would say it to me, you're here to be you, not do, do, do. And I was like, that is such a simple statement. And yet, so it was so impactful to me because I think often I do get wrapped up in what needs to be done and what I can produce or what I can achieve in the time that I'm awake. And I think that that's what you're speaking to exactly is just that time to just be you and to appreciate that uniqueness and what it is that you have to bring to the world and your relationships. And one thing that I'm a big advocate of is purposeful time spent with your kids. I wrote a journal that's called Time for Us. It's a daily prompt journal for parents and children to do together to spend purposeful time. And I loved that in your book, you actually had a list of specific ways to connect with your kids and how to purposefully spend time, at least 20 minutes a day with your children. And I'd love to hear some of your thoughts on that, because I know that that's a big part of your equation to success as a working mom.
Yes, 100%. They've done all these studies that show that we could spend all day, every day with our kids. And if the time was spent with us on our phones or just doing chores around the house or kind of half listening to our kids, that's actually not as good for them as them having discrete periods of time where they know they have our full attention and
Which is
where also,
hard. This is
which is
hard.
very hard. Like I have to
Yeah.
set a timer. I mean, let's real talk. I have to set a timer
Mm-hmm.
to give my kids 20 minutes of undivided attention because we talked about, I have a lot going on, and especially right now, there's a ton going on. So I have to set a timer and then I say to them, let's spend 20 minutes together because now I've made this promise that I really don't want to break, you know, and now they know, they call it their special time. They go, can we have special time together? Which is so rad. I also, though, I mentioned in the book, Ken Ginsberg is one of my favorite people. So if people don't know about him, he is an author with the American Academy of Pediatrics, and he talks about the 7 C's of resilience. He calls it all of these 7 things that really make kids strong when they become adults. And he talks about the idea of connection with our kids. And he says about, it really is important to have that focused time with our kids, but our kids also can't have the focused time if it's like, okay, we're rushing to have the focused time. Okay, hurry up, have the focused time. Okay, mommy's got to go. Let's go during the focused time, right? If my mind in the 20 minutes is thinking about, okay, let's make this quick. Please don't make a mess in the kitchen because then I'm gonna have to pick it up and then I can't. Like it, we do need some of that quantity, and we need it to be often enough with our kids that we're not in a rush when we are trying to spend that focused time connecting with our kids. And in the book, I do talk about by age, actually, ideas for what might be focused special time connection with your kids. The complete benefit of writing a book with the American Academy of Pediatrics is that those publishers vet it like nobody else. And so every single recommendation that is in the book, we talk about healthy foods. We talk about ways to help your kids have a healthy relationship with foods. We talk about sleep and exercise recommendations for kids. We talk about finding childcare and things to look for in a childcare center. And then we talk about the special time recommendations. All of those things have been vetted by all the policymakers at the AAP. So, you can trust it, which of course is a lot of work when you're writing with them. But at the end, it's so great to just know
Bravo.
that
Good for
you got
you.
that seal,
I'm sure that was so much work. And it really is. It's like the parenting Bible. Like it covers so much. And I really appreciated that it's, you talk about getting it done, but also not pushing yourself so hard that you want to die. Have you been thinking about trying to discover your why and maybe defining your purpose a little more clearly? Well, I created a free 5-day email sequence that helps you do just that. It helps you dive into who you are, what your special talents are, and even pushes you a little bit out of your comfort zone with asking questions of people that are close to you. So go to callmeceopodcast.com to access that. And I have a little sneak peek of something up and coming about how to become a virtual assistant. So if that is something that you would think you might want to do in the future, stay tuned, get subscribed to the newsletter so you can hear about all the details, because we will have special discounts for those who are subscribed to our email list. You can go there and find more information at callmeceopodcast.com or camillewalker.co. Another thing I really appreciated that you talked about in the book was that you don't have to do everything a certain way in your mind that you think you might have to. Like if you have something you need to talk to a teacher about, you don't have to do that in person. Take advantage of a text or an email or small things like that that can really free up your time. And I think a big lifesaver for me is grocery delivery. I cannot believe how much, that's one thing I believe that I was doing grocery pickup for a time, but during the pandemic, it ended up that I was waiting sometimes upwards of 1 to 2 hours. And I thought, it's really worth that extra $5 to $10 of just having someone bring it to my house. And I think that there are shortcuts that we're afforded now in this time, in this day and age where, yes, there is so much more complexity, but there are also conveniences that we should take advantage of as moms and not feel guilty about it, not feel like we have to have in-person contact all of the time. Yes, of course, we should meet and know our teachers, but there are things that we can really do to save ourselves a lot of our sanity. And one of the questions I wanted to ask you is what is one of the number one frustrations that you get asked about by mothers in this scenario, and how have you helped them to solve it?
I think one of the biggest things, honestly, is about co-parenting with a partner. Is about developing equity within partner relationships. And of course, I want to speak to the fact there are all types of different partnerships. In the book, I talk to my own experience in a heterosexual relationship with my husband, and to kind of like the depths that we went when we were in a bad place together. And there's a whole chapter that's devoted to building equity. And I see sometimes this misunderstanding that it's supposed to be about equality, that it's like a 50-50 split, when really what you want in your relationship with your co-parenting partner is for it to be that it's just not all scaled toward you, all weighted toward you as the working mom. You don't want to be the default parent on every single thing. The default on bedtime, the default on packing lunches, the default on picking up around the house, the default on every single thing, on decision making even, because we know moms carry a lot of just this mental load, things that aren't even to-do tasks, just the mental load.
Worst. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So we give tips and instructions, solutions for how to address that. The first one really is going through and creating more of a business model for you and your partner, which I know is not sexy, but is totally worthwhile. And it's this idea of just dividing up, like, here are the tasks. These are the things you're responsible for. These are the things that I'm responsible for. If they don't get done and they're on your list, they just don't get done. And of course, there's sometimes somebody's going to be out of town or somebody gets sick and you're going to have to pick up the slack. But just having this common understanding so that we're not building up this resentment over and over and over as like, fine, I'll just do it. Fine, I'll just do it. Fine, I'll just do it. Because then, what happens? Like the resentment builds. And then you're like, poof, Instapot, blows all over the kitchen. And then you end up like in a rage, or you end up like not sleeping as well, or short with your kids or whatever. So that's number one. And then the second is having communication technology that helps you to be in the loop with each other. So shared calendars, shared apps, shared text strings. My mother-in-law, Lord bless her, I love her, but she sends me a text like every single birthday and holiday asking what the kids want for Christmas. And I'm like, I just add my husband onto it every single time and go, Scott, what do you think? And I have him weigh in too, so that way culturally we're kind of changing things with our older generation of parents. We're not going to change their minds 100%, but I'm just like pushing it that way. And that my partner also understands, like, he's part of this decision making and I want his input. And the third and probably final piece, there's other suggestions within the book, but is this idea of, as moms, taking a step back. So Jancy Dunn, in her book, I quote her all the time, How Not to Hate Your Husband After Kids, she talks about this idea of maternal gatekeeping that happens when a person, a partner, in the very beginning in a baby's life, they're trying to like bathe the baby, and maybe the mom is kind of in back of them going like, don't drown them, do it this way, do it that way. And that person kind of backs up from doing the activity because they see, man, they got criticized, or it wasn't as good, or maybe this person's the expert. And that happens all the time in my house, or has the potential to, because I'm a pediatrician.
Mm-hmm.
So I know all the things that my husband has no clue on when it comes to like activity, health, eating, bathing, sleeping, all the things, right? So I've had to decide to like take a step back, remove myself. If I have to walk into the other room to let my husband do it his way, to do that. Because what we see is when we remove that maternal gatekeeping, that then our partners like come in and that they're invested and that they like feel like they're a part of the team. And that in the end has them take on more. And this by no means has made my marriage perfect, but has made it so that when things go awry and I start to feel that resentment come up, I have something to go back to say, okay, I want to talk about our list that we made. I'm feeling kind of like I'm actually the one doing all the things on the list this week. Tell me, like, I want to understand. I don't want to feel frustrated together, but I'm feeling this way. So what do we need to do to make it so that we're more equitable? You know? And I think that helps a lot as we wait for society to change and for everyone to recognize that everybody should be treated as equals.
Yeah. And gosh, you just gave us so much gold. I feel like there's so much that you just said that maternal gatekeeping. Oh, I can see that 1,000%. And especially as a pediatrician, I have family and consumer science education background. So like adult roles and child development and health and diet, all of that is part of my education as well. And I could see how physically removing yourself so that even if they think you might be thinking something, you take away that barrier of that judgment or that perceived judgment. And sometimes that judgment, if you say it out loud and say, oh, no, their head, they can't hold it up, or, whatever that might be.
Mhm.
But I love that. And the list idea, I hope everyone's taking note of that, because I've noticed in my own relationship that if I hold on to something or feel like if there's any sort of resentment that's building up, it always comes out at some point, and typically it's not in the most loving way. So if you
Mhm.
can avoid that by creating a sense of understanding and teamwork, now more than ever, I don't think that our partners necessarily saw that modeled in their own homes, right?
Yeah.
And so we really are creating this new generation of technology and co-working parents and co-tag teaming and all of the things. So I really appreciate that perspective. I think that's going to help a lot of us.
Good. Yeah, no, it's always a work in progress for every single person that I
Yeah.
meet, but I think it's one of those things that's absolutely worth it to invest in, even if you have to get someone else that helps you along the way to have those conversations and to learn how to talk with your partner in a way that is more loving about sharing responsibilities.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Whitney, this has been so wonderful. Tell our audience where they can find more of you. I know you also have your own podcast. It's called the Modern Mommy Doc Podcast. And you also have another book, The New Baby Blueprint. Like, you have so many incredible resources. So tell our audience more about where they can find you.
Yeah. So find me on the web at modernmommydoc.com. And then I hang out on Instagram mostly at modernmommydoc. And you can buy the book wherever books are sold. You can head to Amazon, you can go in stores, it's everywhere. I'm so excited for you to read it. We're always happy to get feedback about what you want to also hear about from a working mom perspective on our Instagram, on our stories and our highlights. We're always doing Monday kind of highlights where we talk about hot topics that people have had questions about. So join us there.
Ah, perfect. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been such a joy to have you.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode of Call Me CEO. If you found it helpful or inspiring, I would love it if you shared it with a friend. And also, I would love it if you came and joined me on Instagram at Call Me CEO Podcast, where you can join other like-minded mamas like you who are looking to step up in their lives and make it even better. Thank you so much, and I will see you next week.